Now, here's the next layer. This is a New York Times headline. Philip Morris to acquire Kraft in $13.1 billion deal from October 1988. So now we're getting into the mid-'80s, and this is the layer that changes everything. So the tobacco industry can see what's coming for them on the horizon, lawsuits, restrictions. So what do? They diversify. So in 1985, Philip Morris buys General Foods for $5.6 billion. Okay. Then R.J. Reynolds buys Nabisco for $4.9 billion. And then in 88, Philip Morris buys Kraft for $13.1 billion. The Kraft acquisition was, at the time, the largest non-oil corporate merger in American history. And by 89, Philip Morris's combined food empire is the largest food company in the world. $20 billion in annual revenue. Like, that's an insane amount. And they bring their entire playbook with them. So here's what you have to understand about tobacco companies. They spent decades studying addiction science at a molecular level. They identified what food scientists call the bliss point. It's the precise combination of sugar, salt, and fat that overrides your body's natural signals that make you stop eating, and instead it makes you overeat. So they perfected this on all the chemical additives, but then they applied it to your food. So now you need to see this. Peer-reviewed research found that during the years that tobacco companies owned these food brands, their products were dramatically more likely to be called what researchers called hyperpalatable, meaning scientifically engineered to override your stop signals. The same people who figured out how to keep you smoking figured out how to keep you eating. At the same time, another piece is falling into place. So take a look at this here. A man named Dwayne Andreas, who's the CEO of Archer Daniels Midland, has a product he needs to make profitable, high fructose corn syrup. It's made from government-subsidized surplus corn. But for it to compete, real sugar has to be expensive. So Andreas spends years lobbying Washington using connections to the Reagan administration, pushing for tariffs and import quotas on foreign sugar. So that works to spike domestic prices, and suddenly high fructose corn syrup is the cheapest sweetener available. So Coca-Cola switches over, so does Pepsi. Then basically every major food manufacturer follows suit. So from essentially zero in 1970, high fructose corn syrup becomes a dominant sweetener in the American diet within 15 years. And it goes into everything. Bread, salad dressings, baby food, yogurt, products you would never even think of being sweet. But now we get to the next layer, the food pyramid. In 92, the USDA releases the food pyramid, the one that most of us grew up with. 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta at the base, fat at the very top, using sparingly. So here's what the USDA doesn't advertise. They withheld the pyramid for a full year in 91 because of pressure from the meat and dairy lobbyists. An internal memo surfaced later showing the USDA pulled the pyramid after industry groups complained. Like, we're talking about a document that's supposed to be federal dietary guidance for Americans' children, and it's being held back because of industry pressure. Now, I want to show you something. So Marion Nestle documented this in her book, Food Politics. The pyramid's design was directly shaped by industry lobbying. They changed the language, they reorganized the structure to serve the companies whose products sat at the base. And who was actually on the committees writing these guidelines anyway? Up to 95% of the USDA Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee members had financial ties to food or pharmaceutical industries. So basically, all of them had a major conflict of interest. The people writing the policy that told your school what to feed your kids were paid by the companies selling the products in the policy. So what happened since then? National obesity rates more than doubled. Diabetes tripled. More than half of American adults are now diabetic or pre-diabetic. The government told you the food pyramid would make you healthy, but it didn't. What it did was make a handful of industries extraordinarily rich. So now we're at layer 6, present day. Check this out. This is the Maha Commission report called Make Our Children Healthy Again. So let's put this whole picture together because these aren't separate stories. I want you to see it as one system. And this is what it looks like when you lay it all out. 1910, Rockefeller removes the doctors who would have noticed the crimes. 1948, P&G funds the institution that becomes the most trusted voice on heart health. 1953, the science gets cherry-picked to make fat the villain and protect sugar. 1965, Harvard is paid to put an institutional stamp on the lie. 1958 and 1997, the legal architecture is built and expanded to let unlimited chemicals into the food supply without review. 1985 through 1988, tobacco addiction engineers take over food manufacturing. In 92, the government puts it on a poster and calls it health policy. And now, here, look at this. This is a quote from the Maha Commission in 2025. Over 40% of American children now have at least one chronic health condition. This is the sickest generation of American children in terms of chronic disease in our history. The Maha Commission publishes a report, and I want to read this directly because this is the federal government's own words. Over 40% of American children now have at least one chronic health condition. This is the sickest generation of American children in terms of chronic disease in our history. It's the government's own words, and it's so sad. And I want you to see this. This is CDC data that shows that 62% of children's calories come from ultra-processed food. It shows that early onset dementia statistics have a 373% increase in 30 to 44-year-olds and a 311% increase in 45 to 54-year-olds. So 62% of the calories consumed by American children now come from ultra-processed food. Early onset dementia is up 373% in 30 to 44-year-olds and up 311% in 45 to 54-year-olds. And your doctor, trained in a Rockefeller-funded system that removed nutrition from the curriculum in 1910, has no framework to connect what you're eating to what is happening inside your brain. The food makes you sick. The pharmaceutical industry, built on the same petrochemical base as the food additives, profits from treating the sickness. The regulatory agencies, who are staffed by people who came from those industries and returned to them. The doctors cannot see the connection because they were never trained to. And the science that might expose any of it can be bought and paid for, ghostwritten, and even placed into what is supposed to be peer-reviewed journals, and even cited in federal regulatory proceedings as independent evidence. It's the same interests, the same money, it's one system. So now you see the big picture. These are documented decisions made by documented people in documented years for documented financial reasons. Now, here's the next layer. This is a New York Times headline. Philip Morris to acquire